Millions head to work expecting a safe return, but sometimes an ordinary workday can turn into an absolute nightmare. In this video, we're uncovering 6 of the worst workplace deaths ever, all triggered by instant errors, hidden dangers, and pure misfortune. It was June 3rd, 2016, in a distribution warehouse on the outskirts of Des Moines. The aisles looked calm from a distance, but the mix of dim lighting, long shadows, and reduced staffing created an environment where small decisions carried more weight than anyone realized. Daniel Kerr, 42, had worked forklifts for nearly 2 decades. He transferred to nights only a month earlier so he could care for his mother during the day while she recovered from hip surgery. Known for steady, methodical work, he avoided unnecessary risks and never rushed loads. Warehouse forklifts operated within narrow aisles bordered by racking that rose more than 20 feet. Visibility at intersections depended on horn signals, headlights, and the driver's ability to judge pallet weight and stopping distance. At night, the lighting produced uneven brightness, leaving blind corners darker than day crews were used to. Daniel understood these limits and usually slowed at each cross aisle, but he was still learning which intersections tended to stay busiest and how sound carried differently in the quieter building. On that shift, he had been assigned to move a full pallet of boxed home goods toward the packaging area. Another operator, newly transferred to nights from the shipping department, was returning with a stack of empty pallets from the opposite direction. Supervisors had reminded the team earlier that the warehouse's humidity sensors were malfunctioning, causing patchy condensation on certain concrete patches, including at least one intersection Daniel was about to cross. A safety coordinator noted the issue but deferred floor markings until morning. The incoming operator had already been corrected earlier for driving with his forks slightly raised, a habit that reduced his forward visibility. As Daniel approached the blind intersection, surveillance later showed him easing off the accelerator. He shifted his weight, the motion suggesting he considered hitting the horn. Instead, he continued forward, likely assuming the lane was clear based on the quiet. The other forklift moved toward the same crossing at a similar speed. Its forks remained raised just high enough to obstruct the operator's view of approaching traffic. Full pallet forklifts traveling 5 miles per hour typically stop within 12 to 15 feet. Matching the collision timing on footage. No horn sounded before the collision. The impact occurred at the precise moment both forklifts entered the intersection. The front end of the incoming machine struck the side of Daniel's forklift and forced him backward into the steel racking. The roll cage pressed into his chest with a compression force that surveillance cameras captured in stark detail. His arms lifted in a reflexive response, not purposeful movement. The shelving beam behind him bent under the load, and a bracket punched into his left side. Witnesses near the next aisle heard only a single horn blast after the collision, likely the other operator reacting in shock. The forklift continued pushing for nearly 2 seconds before the operator reversed. Those seconds produced the fatal injuries: multiple inward rib fractures, lung lacerations, and a torn aorta. Daniel showed no signs of conscious movement once the pressure released. Emergency responders arrived quickly, responding to a coworker's call, but found him without pulse or respiration. The coroner documented massive thoracic crush trauma with instantaneous death. Toxicology reports were normal. Surveillance footage established that both operators entered the intersection at near identical times, with obstructed visibility and no pre-collision horn signals. Daniel's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit, citing inadequate night shift lighting, deferred maintenance, and insufficient enforcement of forklift visibility rules. The company settled out of court. It was September 22, 2014, in the Fremantle Port Yard on Australia's west coast. The morning created a background sense that the workday required more attention than usual. Most crews treated it as routine, though the pace felt slightly rushed, with several late-arriving shipments queued for unloading. Luke Jarvis, 31, worked as a signalman after years as a general dock worker. He was known for precision, especially with hand signals and load-angle communication, a reputation built on dozens of safe lifts. He had recently become a father and taken every overtime shift he could manage, hoping to stabilize finances while maintaining his reliability score with the Port Authority. Port yard lifting operations relied on coordinated rolls. The operator controlled the crane from an elevated cab, while the signalman judged alignment, wind influence, and ground safety. The equipment itself was aging. The hoist cable lifting a steel coil that morning had exceeded its recommended cycle count and showed early signs of strand fatigue, though it had passed a routine inspection 3 months earlier. Moderate wind created a slight sway on suspended loads, especially cylindrical ones like coils, which could twist if not centered. Luke positioned himself about 18 feet from the container, the standard distance to maintain visibility while staying clear of potential swing. The assignment that day involved extracting a large steel coil from a shipping container buried among other high-priority items. The yard supervisor noted rising winds and suggested shortening the lift radius, but the team deemed conditions acceptable since gusts stayed below the cutoff. Luke reviewed the setup and saw no immediate hazards, though he noticed a minor angle deviation in the cable when tension first engaged. It wasn't severe enough to halt the lift, but was something he intended to correct once the coil cleared the container lip. The operator lifted slowly, following Luke's signals. As the coil neared the edge of the container, the wind pushed it a few degrees off-center. Luke signaled a minor pause, but the container's internal lip released the coil at a sharper angle than expected. The crane hook turned slightly under the shifting weight, and the resulting torque transferred into the hoist cable. Witnesses later described hearing metallic pops, first faint, then sharp, as inner strands failed. No one reacted immediately, because the outer layers still held, and the load remained suspended. Seconds later, the final bundle of strands gave way. The severed end of the cable recoiled with extreme force, whipping downward and sideways in a jagged arc at an estimated speed of 50 to 80 miles per hour, striking Luke on the right side of his face and neck. The impact caused severe blunt trauma and crushing injuries to his craniofacial area and upper spine, instantly incapacitating him. Several workers ran toward him. One immediately called paramedics. Paramedics arrived within minutes, and after a rapid assessment, pronounced Luke dead on the scene. On-scene examination confirmed catastrophic craniofacial trauma with upper cervical vertebrae crushed and massive brain injury, consistent with high-force cable strike. Toxicology was clean, and no procedural violations by Luke were documented. The Port Authority issued a safety bulletin detailing cable fatigue thresholds, mandatory replacement intervals, and stricter wind response protocols. Luke's partner requested minimal public mention to avoid media attention. It was March 11th, 2018, in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. The morning was warm and hazy, the kind of weather that made dust cling to every surface of the work site. The suspended scaffold on the east face of the high-rise swayed slightly even before loading began. Amir Farouk, 28, worked as a mason on facade repairs, a role he had taken on steadily rising projects across the city. He was known for reliability and rarely turned down extra shifts. After years of saving, he was close to purchasing his first home, and the project bonus on this renovation would have completed his goal. His supervisors described him as quiet but driven, the type who pushed through fatigue to avoid appearing behind on quotas. The work involved a suspended scaffold system hung from 2 anchor points secured to the roof structure. The platform held tile, mortar buckets, and 3 workers. Suspended systems relied on properly sized bolts, balanced loading, and stable wind conditions. Forecasts showed higher gusts early in the afternoon, but by mid-morning, the readings remained under the cutoff threshold. 1 anchor point had been repaired the previous week, and although the replacement bolt had passed a visual check, it later proved slightly undersized and under-torqued. None of the workers noticed anything unusual when stepping onto the platform. The assignment that day focused on repairing chipped facade panels on the 36th story. It was a straightforward job, but the volume of materials loaded onto the scaffold made the weight distribution uneven. A few workers commented on the stronger-than-expected sway, but continued, wanting to finish their section before temperatures rose further. The foreman conducted a quick radio check and approved the descent, noting mild wind, but nothing warranting delay. Amir positioned himself near the left side, organizing tools while the motorized hoist lowered them. As they descended, gusts began hitting the building at inconsistent angles. The platform vibrated more than usual. One worker suggested pausing to assess, but the team decided to continue since they were already in position. At 10:41 a.m., a noticeable jolt ran through the left suspension line. The sound was faint, more like a creak in gradual tension shift than sudden failure. So no one reacted immediately. Seconds later, stress concentrated at the repaired anchor point. At 10:42 a.m., the left anchor bolt failed under combined load and minor sway, causing the scaffold to tilt sharply on the failing side. Surveillance from across the street captured the moment clearly. The platform lurched downward at an approximate 45-degree angle, swinging toward the facade. Amir, closest to the drop, grabbed the railing while his boots skidded across the metal deck. Tools slid toward him and over the edge. The remaining anchor held briefly, causing the platform to swing and bump against the facade with a hollow impact that echoed through the construction site. Amir lost his grip as the platform struck the building again. The tilt angle made footing impossible. He fell more than 10 stories. Ground crews saw him hit the concrete loading area on his right side before rolling to a stop. Mortar buckets and tiles rained down seconds later, landing nearby but not striking him further. Paramedics arrived within minutes after their foreman's call and confirmed Amir was dead on scene. Coroners documented a disrupted pelvic ring, multiple skull fractures, and widespread internal organ rupture. Death was instantaneous, with no clinical possibility of resuscitation. The injuries were consistent with a side impact fall with rotational forces rather than an exact vertical drop. The company classified the collapse as a procedural deviation and released only a brief internal memo before halting public communication. Amir's family abroad faced weeks of administrative delays before receiving his final wages, which arrived without the bonus he had relied on. His foreman stepped down from supervisory duties and requested reassignment to regular labor for the rest of the year. It was July 16, 2017, at a limestone quarry near Sudbury, Ontario, Canada. The morning was overcast with a light drizzle, leaving metal surfaces slick with moisture and fine aggregate dust clinging to every surface, creating an environment that could quickly turn fatal. Michael Derry, 46, had worked in quarries for over 20 years and was considered highly skilled with heavy machinery. He routinely volunteered for Sunday shifts so younger employees could spend time with their families. Michael had a reputation for often underestimating the risks of working alone. His role required constant attention to material flow and machine vibration. Quarry crushers rely on synchronized rollers and high-torque motors. Even small obstructions or improper alignment can produce violent motion. Michael had been trained by his employer, a mid-sized family-run mining company, and had consistently met inspection standards. On Sunday mornings, he often handled initial checks and feed adjustments without direct supervision, relying on routine knowledge and past experience. The quarry's procedures required that feed chutes be locked out before inspection, but Michael bypassed the lockout, trusting his familiarity with the machine. That day, Michael was inspecting a feed chute that had been intermittently backing up. The chute's lip was slick from damp gravel, and aggregate had begun to pile unevenly. Two co-workers were nearby calibrating a loader, but had only partial line of sight to his location. Weather alerts had predicted a brief rain, but conditions were within operational tolerances. The quarry had no formal rule explicitly prohibiting solo inspections, and Michael proceeded to check the chute through a small inspection port above the rollers while the machine remained energized. Footprints reconstructed after the incident showed he stepped on a patch of wet aggregate directly at the edge. He bent forward to examine the blockage, stabilizing himself with one hand on the chute edge. A small slip sent his boot sliding across the metal surface, causing his weight to shift forward faster than he could react. The co-workers noticed the imbalance, but were obstructed from intervening by the loader machinery. As Michael pitched forward, his gloves scraped the metal edge of the chute. His upper body entered the feed opening, and the crusher immediately engaged. Due to the design of the older machine, the first roller assembly was exposed at that location without an immediate emergency stop button within reach. A co-worker sprinted toward the emergency stop, but by the time he reached it, the first roller assembly had already drawn Michael into the crushing surfaces. Witnesses described the machine's normal grinding sound suddenly increasing in pitch as it caught material, then falling silent once the cycle completed. Another worker immediately dialed emergency services, yelling for help as others cleared the area. Paramedics arrived approximately 15 minutes later, pronouncing Michael dead at the scene. Post-mortem examination confirmed traumatic dismemberment. The crushing cycle destroyed the torso and upper limbs, resulting in instantaneous death, consistent with entry into the active rollers without protective guards. Forensics matched the torn protective equipment and biological material to Michael, confirming the rapidity and fatal severity of the incident. Following the accident, the quarry management implemented a mandatory two-person policy for Sunday and off-peak shift maintenance. His co-workers, many of whom had benefited from his willingness to cover extra shifts, ensured his legacy prompted stricter safety measures. It was September 12, 2014, at a commercial refrigeration facility in Manchester, United Kingdom. The morning was overcast, and the large industrial hall hummed with compressors and fans. Nothing in the environment suggested immediate danger, but the decision to perform live work on high-voltage switchgear created conditions where even a minor lapse could be fatal. Thomas Hale, 39, was a senior electrician with over 15 years of experience in industrial installations and maintenance. He had recently taken on additional contracts to fund his daughter's university tuition, and the extra workload often meant longer days and limited rest. Thomas was comfortable with complex electrical systems, including bus bars, insulated tools, and arc-rated protective equipment, but understood that the 11 kilovolt panels he was working on could deliver fatal energy in milliseconds if mishandled. Live panel work demanded insulated gloves, face shields, flame-resistant clothing, and careful sequencing to prevent arcing or inadvertent shorts. Thomas carried these responsibilities conscientiously, but was aware that client pressure could override best practices. Official risk assessments were in place, and the client had signed a waiver allowing live work on a single energized panel, citing the need to maintain refrigeration uptime. That day, the client requested a panel replacement without shutting down a section powering critical refrigeration units. Thomas initially advised against live work, but ultimately agreed after confirming procedural safeguards, including a cleared exclusion zone, use of insulated tools rated for 11 kilovolts, and arc-rated protective equipment. Colleagues remained nearby, monitoring from a distance while he accessed the bus connections. As Thomas tightened the final connection, his screwdriver slipped slightly, making contact between two adjacent phases due to the narrow bus spacing and a minor flaw in the tool insulation. Security cameras later showed a sudden white bloom erupting from the panel. Temperatures reached thousands of degrees almost instantly, and the arc flash produced a blast pressure that propelled Thomas backward into a wall. The protective equipment limited external burns, but the overpressure and blast force caused severe internal injuries, including pulmonary contusions and transient cardiac arrhythmia, consistent with high-energy open-air arc flashes at close range. Witnesses roughly 20 feet away were thrown to the floor by the force of the blast. Fire suppression activated within seconds, spraying a fine mist and extinguishing secondary sparks. The panel and surrounding flooring were scorched, and scattered tools bore evidence of exposure to the intense heat. Thomas's body lay slumped against the wall, face and hands marked by superficial burns, but with fatal trauma internally. A co-worker immediately called emergency services, reporting the electrical arc and injuries. Paramedics arrived within minutes, assessed Thomas, and pronounced him dead at the scene. Forensics confirmed that the arc's velocity and energy were consistent with the bus voltage and spacing recorded that day. Post-mortem revealed thermal burns to the face and hands, pulmonary contusions, ruptured eardrums, and cardiac arrhythmia induced by blast overpressure. The facility documented the incident internally, noting the client's refusal to authorize a shutdown, but categorizing it as technician error. Following the accident, the contractor revised live work protocols, adding stricter risk assessment documentation and client approval requirements for any live interventions, and emphasized stricter authorization for high-voltage live work. Thomas Hale's daughter later completed her engineering degree with scholarship support. It was February 8, 2018, at Stockholm Arlanda Airport, Sweden. The morning had seen a steady snowfall, heavy enough that visibility along taxiways dropped below 60 feet. Henrik Solberg, 60, was a veteran airport grounds crew member who had spent over 3 decades clearing runways and taxiways. Weeks from retirement, he often took pride in mentoring newer staff, emphasizing situational awareness and the importance of always checking behind moving equipment. He was familiar with all standard operating procedures for winter runway maintenance, maintaining safe distances from moving vehicles, wearing high-visibility clothing, and coordinating constantly over radio channels. Henrik also knew that snow accumulation could obscure drains, signage, and curbs, and that rear-mounted blades on plows presented particular hazards if someone ventured too close. Despite decades of experience, he occasionally took calculated risks to inspect minor issues personally, confident his knowledge and reflexes would keep him safe. That morning, Henrik was checking a frozen drain along the edge of a taxiway, while a snowplow prepared to reposition for another runway sweep. The plow operator had been juggling radio communications from multiple simultaneous runway clearings, adjusting mirrors, and steering around accumulating snow. Snowfall continued heavily, creating a roiling wall of white and masking the sound of engines. Surveillance footage later showed Henrik moving behind the plow's rear quarter as the operator glanced away to adjust controls, a position that would soon prove lethal. The plow, preparing to align with the taxiway edge, shifted into reverse. The engine's roar and the whipping snow drowned out any warning sounds. Mirrors were partially obscured by frost, and the operator had limited visibility. Henrik's body, crouched slightly to inspect the drain, was positioned directly behind the rear blade assembly. He did not see the vehicle move, and there was no time to react. Footage shows the plow's rear assembly striking Henrik, knocking him to the ground. The rear tires passed over his legs and torso, dragging him approximately 4 to 5 feet along the icy pavement. A co-worker, finally noticing the impact, shouted, prompting the operator to stop immediately. By the time other crew members reached him, Henrik was critically injured and likely already unconscious, pinned under the heavy machine. Traces of hydraulic fluid coated the surrounding ice in a thin layer rather than a thick puddle, and the force of the tires had left clear impressions in the snow. Emergency services were called immediately by the operator. Paramedics arrived within minutes and stabilized Henrik on site, carefully lifting him onto a stretcher and rushing him to the hospital. Despite intensive care and resuscitation efforts, he succumbed to massive internal injuries en route, including crushing trauma to the thorax and abdomen, severe pelvic fractures, and extensive internal hemorrhage. The airport's internal review placed emphasis on Henrik's positioning behind the vehicle, a phrasing that caused resentment among longtime crew members who felt it implicitly shifted blame onto him. His replacement completed training early due to staffing shortages, later reporting feeling unprepared for the winter season. Thanks for watching. If you like these stories, click here.